Dames en heren, welkom bij het webinar van vandaag. Fijn dat u er weer bij bent. We hebben de komende 3 kwartier een webinar voor de boeg met een prachtig voorbeeld uit Duitsland. Dat webinar volgt een vrij rechttoerig aan format, zou je kunnen zeggen. Ik introduceer zometeen heel kort de 3 sprekers. Die hebben daarna 35 minuten om hun verhaal te vertellen. En aan het einde kom ik weer even in beeld om met hen nog wat vragen af te handelen, die u dus natuurlijk kunt stellen via de Q&A-mogelijkheid linksboven in uw scherm op het platform waar u nu zit te kijken. Goed, de webinar gaat over een soort kwaliteitssysteem in mijn woorden. Dat is ontwikkeld en uitgerold, zou je kunnen zeggen, in Duitsland rondom prostaatkanker. Er zijn 3 gasten. Günter Feick, die vertelt vanuit het patiëntperspectief het een en ander. We hebben Christoph Kowalski, hij is van het Deutsche Krebsgesellschaft. En Sebastian Dieng is van OnkoZert en dat is de certificeringsorganisatie die hierbij is betrokken. Omdat het internationaal is, doen we dat natuurlijk in het Engels. So I will be switching in English now. Günter, Christoph, Sebastian, are you there?
Ready to go.
Great to see you. Thanks for being here and sharing your story with us. I just introduced the webinar briefly. I told the participants that we have a straightforward format. It's 35 minutes of presentation by you guys. And then afterwards, we've got about 10 minutes for questions people might have. I briefly introduced you, but you will be introducing yourselves as well. And Günter, if I understand it correctly, you are the first to speak. Is that correct?
The first, but not the only one. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, well, take it away and I see you in 35 minutes.
Okie dokie, thank you very much. Guten Nachmittag, dames en heren. Meeting with you is a privilege, and my thanks go to Tessa van der Plicht, who made it possible. During this session, we will communicate with you about outcomes-based healthcare for prostate cancer in Germany and abroad. We, that is Dr. Christoph Kowalski, Sebastian Dieng, and myself. My name is Günter Feick. I'm a prostate cancer patient and a patient representative for the Bundesverband Prostaatkanker-centra in Germany, a non-profit association for prostate cancer patients and their families. We believe that measuring, reporting, and comparing clinical and patient-reported outcomes will improve patients' treatments, patients' health, and their quality of life. What, though, is today's reality in healthcare management? Healthcare systems are mandated and resourced for achieving the best effectiveness, that is, doing the right things, and efficiency, that is, doing the things right. How can we appraise the true quality of healthcare systems, of hospitals, and individual treatments? Without quality management systems, we are on a blind flight which is antagonistic to any concept of good care. And we would have to confess to not know whether or not we operate in the Eredivisie or in the Hoofdklasse. Why are changes in healthcare management necessary and overdue? The health and well-being of my patient will be my first consideration. That is the physician's pledge in the Geneva Declaration of the World Medical Association. Isn't this pledge a strong commitment for understanding and applying techniques and dynamics of measuring, comparing, and reporting outcomes for improvement of patients' care? As there is no relevant dispute about quality improvements and transparency in healthcare, the concept of how to organize quality management in healthcare is in a vivacious state of discussion. As this discussion may continue for however long, I shall maintain that with all the parameters that measure medical conditions, in the end, there's only one really important factor: the patient's health and their quality of life. Only this will tell who is really doing good work and who does not. Of this identical opinion were 86% of patients participating in a survey by the Bertelsmann Foundation. What now are the challenges changes and chances in outcomes-based healthcare. First, the challenges. We've got to define a standard set of clinical quality indicators and patient-reported outcomes that will be consented internationally. 39 standard sets of outcomes have already been developed by the International Consortium for Health Outcomes Measurement. These standard sets include measurement tools, time points, and risk adjustment factors for comparison of outcomes, and they are readily available for use. About the changes. Physicians, documentation staff, and hospital leaders must understand the outcome measurement documentation and comparison process. Controls of plausibility and data accuracy checks must be in place for periodic review and analysis of outcomes. Sharing of outcome data with other healthcare providers and with the public is essential for comparing quality of care. Now about the chances. Hospitals can resort to a rational quality management program without which enterprises were not successful ever. Physicians and other staff will have access to an objective individual performance benchmarking. Communication of physicians and patients, including joint decision-making and follow-up, will be facilitated through use of outcomes data. And finally, patients' health and quality of life will improve and can be attributed. Closing my comments, I wish to say next will be Sebastian Dieng of OnkoZert and Dr. Christoph Kowalski of the German Cancer Society. They will present what it takes implementing and sustaining an outcomes-based quality management systems for the care of localized prostate cancer patients. They do a great job in outcomes-based healthcare and study, and they are our favorite cooperating partners. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Günter, and many thanks for the invitation. I have the pleasure now to briefly introduce you to the prostate cancer outcome study, which is a joint effort of the German Cancer Society, the prostate cancer self-help in Germany, OnkoZert, and is partly funded by the Movember Foundation, and as the prostate cancer outcome study is also part of the larger True North Global Registry, so it's a worldwide effort to measure quality of prostate cancer care. My COI is that I am an employee of the German Cancer Society, and I'll start with a brief everyday example from the sports area to demonstrate the absurdity of the situation we're in. So imagine you're responsible for the success of a Eredivisie team, so first league in Netherlands football, for example, FC Emmen. And if you are and you finished last in the first half of the season, then you see that your team is not doing well. You have tons of data about every player you have in your team. You have ideas of what to improve, and you have the power to do so, to implement measures to improve the situation. And if you're doing well, you can play an incredible second half of the season. So in the end, we know then came Breda, and you made it only to second league after all, but still an incredible success in the second half. So you might say this is $1 million or $1 billion business. That's professional sports, but even if you look at, say, the third last German badminton division, even there you see where you stand after every match. You have tons of information about your players. For example, if you look at the player Kowalski, that is me, you can easily see that he's winning all his singles and losing all his doubles. You might think maybe it is because he's just playing with the wrong partner, his doubles, and then you can dive into the data and see, no, he's losing doubles no matter with whom he's playing. So even in this context, you have lots of information, you have tons of data, you have ideas of what to improve, and you can really do things to improve the situation. And when you do so, you can finish second in the end and make it to the next higher league. So you play an incredible rest of the season. And so now what is absurd is if you are responsible for the success of a prostate cancer center that affects the lives of hundreds or thousands of patients, relative, and so on every year, then you have no information. If your center is doing well, you have hardly any data on outcomes. You can hardly develop ideas of what to improve. And even if you had the power to implement measures, you wouldn't know what to do because you're lacking the information. So you cannot make outcome-centered decisions. And that's the whole point about the PCO study that we brought on its way in 2016, that we make available data that are typically not collected and reported in routine cancer care. So to give providers the opportunity to compare themselves with others. And in the specific situation of prostate cancer, there are symptoms and functional impairments after treatment that affect the lives of the patients very deeply, especially since survival chances are relatively good. So we have lots of survivors that altogether suffer immensely from the results of the treatment. Most notably here are erectile dysfunction and urinary incontinence. And urinary incontinence, of course, that also affects the family, because all your social functioning is impaired, your emotional functioning, and so on. We also expect that these outcomes vary between providers. So we know that there are these impairments, but before we had PCO, we had no exact idea of how much variation there was. So if we talk about outcomes for prostate cancer, we're not only talking about survival, but also about patient-reported outcomes, specifically and most importantly, urinary incontinence and erectile dysfunction. You typically don't have this information on a routine basis, but you have to collect this using systematic surveys. That's not simple and costly. That's important to know. You really must want this. You're not getting this data just on the way. And the good thing is that, and this has already been mentioned by Günter Feick, that you don't have to come up with a new idea because everything is already there. You don't have to define the data you're collecting. It's all in the IHM standard data set for localized prostate cancer. Among these, the questionnaire that you should use, which is the EPIC 26, as well as the exact time points when to collect this information. It's all in this document. So that's how it started in 2015. The Movember Foundation asked providers throughout the world to take part in this endeavor with the aim of comparing, so first collecting and comparing outcomes, and then to find ways to reduce this variation. Prostate Cancer Self-Help asked us, the German Cancer Society, to participate. We asked the centers that are certified according to our standards to participate. Immediately 24 responded. Now we have over 130,000 patients were already recruited, and we are part of the True North Global Registry I already mentioned. We do not get funding from the German government. That's important, but at the moment we are reliant on the donations from Australians, actually, which is a pity. And the participation, that's important, is voluntary. Centers participate nevertheless, even though they are not reimbursed for this, because they see how relevant this is, and because it's relatively easy for them to collect the data, because they already collect clinical information as part of the certification process. In Germany, that is a huge quality assurance effort. If you're interested in the certification of prostate cancer and other cancer centers, let me know. I'll connect you with the right person in our institution. So this is just briefly the results of the first tranche of data that we analyzed last year, including 10,000 patients from 100 centers. It's only urinary incontinence for after radical prostatectomy, 12 months after surgery. And this is how we present this. So this is the sample descriptions looks pretty much like what you expect. And in addition to the ICHM data, we also collect information on social demographics because we thought that's important for case mix adjustment. That's only the details. If you're interested in this, I'm happy to answer to this later. And this is what the centers then see. Every dot with the antennas around it is one center, and you can easily identify how you do compared to everybody else. This data has not been hasn't existed before PCO, and now we know how this very important for patients, very important dimension of outcome quality is in each center. And centers who are not happy with their position here, they can develop ideas of how to improve. We can also compare our data with that of other countries, for example, for the US, which is pretty similar, somewhat worse in Germany, but it's but there's still some work to do to see if these samples are really comparable. As part of the larger True North Global Registry, again using the exact same data set, where we have 15 countries overall in it, and also some sites from the Netherlands, not to forget. It's the Santiago group who's taking part in this, which has overall recruited over 80,000 patients worldwide. We can compare our data, the red dot here, with that of centers around the world, and Germany is doing pretty okay, right in the middle of everybody. But we can discuss this, and we can formulate aims of where we want to go, of course, in the upper right corner here, which is the best position. So this is briefly the take-home message that I prepared, that we, after 5 years, so this takes the time, collecting the data, we have the data that providers can use and now work to come up with measures for improvement if they think they're not doing as good as they wish to. We can define targets for prostate cancer centers for the future. So, for example, improving their position on the global comparison, or to improve by, say, 1 standard deviation or by 1 MID in 5 years and so on. That's all possible now, hasn't been before. And one thing that is important to mention here, and that's different from what the Dutch government is planning, is that PCO is voluntary and results are not publicly reported. So it's really voluntary, and centers are meant to work with them on their own. And now Sebastian Dieng from OnkoZert will get into more detail of how data collection works and how we achieve such a provider commitment.
Okay, thank you very much, Christoph. Thank you very much, Günter. Well, thank you very much for giving me the possibility to talk at this webinar. Thank you, Tessa van der Vlucht and Marcel Brosens, for the invitation. My name is Sebastian Dieng, and I'm the technical project manager of the prostate cancer outcome study in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And I'm working for the company OnkoZert, which is responsible for both the management of the DK certification system and the data management involved. So Christoph has talked a lot about how it all started, so I will skip this one. And I would like to present to you the issue from a different angle. In July 2016, we had 24 German and Swiss prostate cancer centers taking part of the register. Today, 106 prostate cancer centers taking part. This is more than 50% of all study centers worldwide. DKG certified PCCs are the largest contributor to the True North Globe registry with about 35%. And right now we enroll between 8,000 to 9,000 patients a year. So the question is, how has it been possible to introduce an almost nationwide program of measuring and comparing prostate cancer centers with the ICHM standard dataset? Why do I think is this question important? In my opinion, value-based healthcare makes sense if we have a sufficient number of centers which we can compare on a fair basis. So you need to figure out what are the mechanisms which make these larger systems work. I will present a few reasons. However, first and foremost, I would like to stress that there was a strong, even though not state-run, but there was a strong coalition from the beginning. When we introduced TNGR, we were happy to have a variety of strong partners, starting from the German prostate cancer self-help group, of which Günter Feick is a representative and former president. This is an association of dedicated prostate cancer patients who want to have patient-reported outcome measurements established in every hospital. The founding president of ICHOM, which is a strong global organization, you already heard that, was the German Dr. Jens Baerbock, which we are connected to. Professor Huland, the founder of the world's largest prostate cancer center, the Martini Clinic in Hamburg, is a pioneer on that field, and he shared his knowledge on measuring outcome. With the certification system, the German Cancer Society offers a perfect framework. And also due to certification, we have a well-established market of software developers for tumor documentation systems. But let's start now with the 3 reasons. The first one, synergies between the DKG certification system and TNGR. As you can see, the system for prostate cancer centers established in 2007 is growing. In the centers, in this case 140, more than 30,000 prostate cancer patients received their treatment. That's about 50% of all cases in Germany a year. There are a variety of synergies. However, I would like to present the 2 most important ones. In order to become a certified center, you have to submit the data sheet, an Excel file with a description of the center's population, how many patients, which risk classifications, and which main treatment, and the quality indicators, for example, complication rates, or what's the percentage of the patients presented in the tumor board. So the centers need to document their patients in commercial or self-built tumor documentation applications. Second, there is a yearly audit, and it's good with all automatization. It's good to have a human person coming into your hospital and checking the data every year in a framework of an audit, which makes the plausibility and the validity of the data always better. So summarized, there is a communication channel which already exists due to certification. So we have several contacts with the centers every year due to certification. It's an instrument for a carrot and sticks approach, and we have the chance to develop results over time because the certification system is a stable framework. Second reason is the central IT infrastructure for collecting clinical and PROM data. Our central IT infrastructure consists of several parts. First, we have a central infrastructure for the patient-reported outcome measurements. At the beginning, all centers were obliged to use our central system. We wanted to make sure that the process of collecting PROMs and transferring the data to the database was the same in every center. And that was a good decision because most clinics didn't have anything on their own. Independent from the fact whether the patient fills out the questionnaire on paper or online, all surveys are saved, pseudonymized into a database on a central server. Even though well into the 21st century, we are very happy that we have given the centers both options. So why is that? As you can see, the online rate concerning the baseline surveys is not great. It's only about 25%. And we did a lot to motivate centers to use the online questionnaire. The centers received tablets. In the introductory workshops, we urged the centers to convince patients to going for the post-therapeutic online questionnaire cost argument. And we explained advantages that they can see their quality of life scores right away and faster if they use the online version. To a certain degree, our infrastructure, post-paid envelopes, is a disincentive for using the online solution, but we are working on that. A second problem was that a lot of high-volume centers in Germany and other PCCs use proprietary developments or commercial survey software, so they are not using our survey infrastructure. So we ask ourselves, how can we integrate these prostate cancer centers using alternative applications? And so we developed an interface so that the center does not have to leave its own survey infrastructure, but can send an expert with the relevant data we need for the PCO study. And we have 2 famous centers, the Martini Clinic in Hamburg and the University of Dresden, which is using that approach, number of centers growing. What about the clinical data? Tumor documentation systems in the hospitals generate a specific XML file, which includes all clinical data fields for ICHOM and for the certification. The data are imported locally into the OnkoBox prostate, and the data sheet for the certification is generated. We talked about that before. For that matter, we have, in the last 5 years, connected 25 tumor documentation systems to the OnkoBox prostate. This represents 100% of the software systems which are used in prostate cancer centers. So we use the same mechanism for the PCO study. However, in this case, the OnkoBox merges the data from the survey database with the clinical data from the tumor documentation systems. Further, the OnkoBox makes a quality check of the data, giving the centers a feedback where they need to correct the data. To summarize that, the central organization and support for surveys was crucial in terms of comparability. Building on both paper and online was crucial. And we think that interfaces from proprietary survey systems will grow in importance in the future. Data sanitization through an IT meta tool, the OnkoBox, so using existing structures, was very, very important rather than developing something new. The to-do list for the centers to solve the data problems locally, and the OnkoBox has a multiple purpose. It's for the centers, it's good that they can use it for certification and for the study, so don't have different applications. What else did we do? Actions to support our centers. Well, they have always real-time access to the quality of life scores for every patient right away after the survey was entered into their system. We have developed a real-time monitoring. So we want to warn the centers much earlier when they do not recruit enough patients. As Christoph already said, it's crucial that we ask as much as patients as possible. And centers like that because they want to know where they stand. And if we have seen the participation has increased significantly since we have introduced this tool. We differentiate. We want to praise the centers doing well. Therefore, we confer certificates to centers which show very good performance indicators concerning enrollment rates, post-therapeutic survey rates, and data quality. In total, all 5 criteria need to be met, and right now about half of the centers hold this certificate. We designed and printed flyers for the patients and posters for waiting rooms. So we had a real branding for the PCO study the centers can do marketing with. Since 2016, we set up regular meetings, workshops, and webinars with centers. We hope that we can do more in the second half of 2021 if Corona let us to do so. We have quarterly newsletters to keep the centers posted what we are doing with the data and what new kind of functionalities we have established for them. We have conducted an interview with patient advocate Günter Feick's colleague, to convince hospitals that taking part of the PCO study is an explicit wish of the patients. So, introducing the study did not stop with building up an IT infrastructure. Study centers get a variety of centrally organized support. We are trying to differentiate between very well-performing centers and others to motivate both. Well, if every center would be bad, we would not have a leverage to motivate others, but fortunately, we have very good centers. Last but not least, reports. The last 3 sections answered the question I asked at the beginning. The last section is more about how can we keep centers motivated to do this tremendous work they're doing right now. Here is the graph with the infrastructure again. The data we gather from the centers are summarized in various reports. For that, we have an application which is called Whitebox. So you see, we like boxes. The Whitebox can automatically generate a variety of benchmarking reports, as you have seen in Christoph's presentation. So it's very important that we have now these reports and that the centers know where they stand and that we have an easy technological infrastructure to generate these reports. However, there is a new project, and in May, we piloted the 1-year patient monitor. It's a new OnkoBox function which we have, and this function gives the centers an immediate feedback after they have received the post-therapeutic survey after 1 year. On one sheet, they can see diagnosis, primary treatment, path, clinical outcome, and most importantly, the patient's loss or gain of quality of life for the two dimensions, continence and sexuality, compared to patients having received the same treatment and classified in the same risk category. I come back to one of my first slides. Measuring is good, but you always need to have the comparison with lots of other patients to learn whether the result of the patient is really bad or only comparatively bad. And we have received a lot of positive feedback from the pilot centers, which were saying, this is exactly what we want. We want to know how's the patient doing after 1 year in comparison to similar patients, and now we can do something about it. So there's no easy solution how to make reports work and how to keep centers motivated. However, I think with the annual report and the 1 year patient monitor, we have powerful tools to bring change to the hospitals. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are very happy now to get your questions.
Wow. Wow, guys, very impressive. Thank you very much. I started writing down some questions for myself, but you addressed a lot of them already in your presentation. So very, very good. Thank you very much. I'm glad we recorded this so people can look at it maybe on a later moment as well to process all the information you put in your presentation. Thank you very much. We've got some questions from people following this presentation. Let me just, say them to you, and we'll see how far we can come. Somewhere in your story you said that the data or the information was not publicly shared. I think that was in Christoph's presentation. Could you maybe elaborate on why you are not publicly sharing it, and do you have any plans to do so maybe in the future?
Yeah, that's of course one of the central questions when we talk about this program. Since it's voluntary, if we'd say the information is publicly available and everybody can see where each center stands, then we would kind of spill the baby with the tub water, I think, because we'd punish some of the centers who are really interested in improving, first to know where they stand and then to improve the care they provide. But once we present their results immediately, then then this effort is in vain, because they are blamed for something good they are doing, that is knowing where they stand. So in addition to that, we know that, especially if you use questionnaires and you as a provider recruit the patients, there are ways to game, say, the system that we do not want to support. So we really want that the centers to work with their data and to learn from that data, and then to initiate measures to improve if they find that is necessary. That does not mean that that we are against public reporting in principle. So there may be a situation in the future where we're so far that that we can do this without putting the measurement of outcomes data in jeopardy.
So to understand this correctly, currently can prostate cancer patients in Germany find some of this information to, for example, choose their prostate cancer center, or is the information at this point not findable for patients?
Patients can. So patients can find out if a particular center participates in the PCO study.
Mm-hmm.
And once they found that out, they can ask the center if they're willing to discuss their outcomes data with them.
And do you encourage patients to do that, or is this for patients who are very aware of this possibility, or do you encourage them? Do you communicate about it to patients?
Yeah, whenever a patient asks me, I tell him that this possibility exists, of course, but we're not like, so I mean, even if we, I don't know if, do you, Günter Feick, do you as the BPS, do you encourage patients to go this way?
Okay, thank you for the question and for the opportunity to address it from a patient's point of view. There's a lot of merit in that, what Christoph said, but it's in the end totally unacceptable. We share this, and we work towards, those three and others work towards, with the German government to have a system that includes that all centers, not certified as prostate cancer centers, but hospitals rather, will have to report in the same identical way we are reporting them now on a voluntary basis. That is number one. We are not there yet, but we're working towards this. The Prostate Cancer Patient Support Organization puts on its homepage all relevant data, which enables patients to find out who is part of the study, who is part of the measurement system. And they can ask the centers to give those data. Mm-hmm. Once we find out that this data will not be given to a patient, we have the opportunity to intervene as good as we can in direct cooperation with the center. So about half of the centers anyhow have a written cooperation statement with those centers. So there are ways we're going about it, but it's not totally sufficient. It will be sufficient as it will be transparent, publicly open, available.
Okay, maybe a question which is related to this one. If you have participated as a patient in filling out questionnaires, you have delivered, so to say, data, can you then, as a patient who participated in the study, see your results maybe compared to others in any way? So this is not about patients maybe choosing a prostate cancer center, but patients who are already involved in the study. Can they somehow see their data and relate that to other patients maybe?
The same answer applies. If the center wishes to honor the request of the study patient, then he will see it. So he's not buying with his study participation, he's not buying this information as self-explanatory that the center would owe him. That gives me a thought right at this meeting that we kind of try to see whether or not we could change the system a bit, that is with your consent to be part of the study as a patient. You're already getting the information that you will be seeing, at least the results from this center. I think that is a valuable idea to consider, which I will, as my take-home message from your webinar, I will take home and discuss with the two, Christoph and Sebastian.
Okay.
Maybe in addition to this, one way to encourage patients to use the web option is that the patient immediately has all the results once you filled out the online form. And of course, he can always ask the hospital to get the report that Sebastian just showed him. But it's of course easier and right there if you use the online option.
So in the online option, you have sort of a reward as a patient that you can see your data compared to the totality maybe of the patient population, something like that. Is that correct?
You see the quality of life scores, yes.
Okay. Maybe another topic. This is a question by Paul van Kampen, who is also listening online. To what extent is the data based on FAIR principles, which is of course findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable? Do you use those principles? Do you know them and do you use them or not, maybe?
So this is, as I mentioned, this is quality development or quality assurance with framed as a study. So every patient gives informed consent to participation in the study, and this consent includes that both the individual center as well as we, OnkoZert and German Cancer Society, may use the data. So every center that wants to use the data can use their own data if they are interested in additional analyses based on the larger data set. Then we have an informal process of suggesting research questions that we then, if time and resources allow, try to answer.
Another question in line with this is, do you collaborate or exchange ideas or learnings with the EU health data space? Are you familiar with that initiative, and do you somehow connect with that?
I'm not exactly familiar with that, but we're not collaborating yet, but I think we'd be happy to do so in the future.
I've got two more cooperation questions. Thank you for your willingness, of course, for answering these. There are also organizations in the Netherlands who collect data, like DICA or IKNL. Do you know those, and do you somehow cooperate with them already, or?
Come again? Which
yeah, there are organizations in the Netherlands who also collect data. DICA is one of them, and IKNL is another one. IKNL. Do you know those organizations, or are you not familiar with them yet? I think Günter.
Yes, I of course know them. I know them from researching the net in trying to find out who is in a similar situation, who has similar aims as we have. And there I've come across with them. And I believe, Sebastian, have you had with DICA some exchange of thoughts and ideas, or am I mistaken?
No, only in the framework of the TNGR where something takes place, we have contacts to the Netherlands.
Okay. Another question we got online is, did you somehow discuss bundle payment options? Because if you know the outcomes of centers, then you can somehow arrange payment options around that maybe. Did you already work on those kinds of things?
This is absolutely the next step as far as I'm concerned, as far as the patients are concerned. Like total transparency, as we discussed before, and then pay for performance. And as a matter of fact, it is partly implemented in Germany already. That is true for so-called oncological centers. Those oncological centers get an extra financial bonus on top of that what other hospitals for the same type of treatment get. This is not true for organ cancer centers. You got to be a different type of oncological center which has several organ centers to it. So that is a first good step, but I don't think it's enough. There's no sense paying the same amount of money to a poor performer and paying that little for a good performer. It's not good for the performers, it's not good for the patients, and it's not good for the financial budget of the healthcare system in Germany, because we want to pay the money where there's good performance. That's actually the idea, and that's something I can see where we patients and patient organizations have to continue to press on. I don't think our government is that alert and quick on this issue, unfortunately, but they have to improve.
Thank you, Günter. We're almost running out of time. Two questions. The first one is, we talked about patients and getting their information and results. Are those results, or are the results from the PCO study somehow used in shared decision making? So, you know, you've got all this data. can patients somehow, or clinicians, can they somehow use it in their shared decision making?
So maybe I get this one. Yeah, the thing is, this is going to be the next step from a technological point of view that we want to, this is a midterm project that we use the data right at the beginning of the treatment after the patient have filled out the questionnaire. Right now, we're only collecting at baseline, and we have the option now with the patient monitor after 1 year, but we want to implement that also for the baseline situation to make that possible.
And then maybe the final question. You told something about carrots and sticks in your story. Is there some kind of action towards prostate cancer centers who do not reach certain targets?
Well, right now it's like you have to enroll as much as patients as possible, and we have some cutoff rates where we say that's not enough. The centers right now do not have any financial interest in it, and they have tons of work doing this. So the only thing what we can do is set some incentives, like the certificates that we had, or that we punish the centers that they're not allowed anymore to take part. But that's right now, that's it.
Okay, thanks. Came up with just one more question, but that will be the final one. First, let me say thank you for also answering these questions, because I see also that your presentations inspires us to all kinds of ideas, and that's where these questions come from. So thank you for answering them. Maybe my final question: does your approach inspire other forms of cancer, or maybe even other diseases in Germany, to work along the same lines? Is your example being followed already?
Yeah, it's being followed by ourselves. So we have a very similar program for colorectal cancer centers in Germany that's actually been funded by the German joint committee. So that's money from the health insurance companies. And I think there are other projects as well that try and implement patient-reported outcomes for individual patient treatment, but also for quality assurance purposes. So yeah, there are quite a number of programs that are starting at the moment, or have started in the recent past.
Okay, thank you. That's about it. Günter, Christoph and Sebastian, thank you for your presentation. Congratulations with your approach. I think it's very interesting to hear from you. I will wrap up in Dutch, but thank you very much for joining us and sharing your approach.
Thank you too for the invitation.
Thank you, bye-bye. En ik rond af in het Nederlands. Het laatste wat ik nog even met u wilde delen is dat om 3 uur natuurlijk de werkbezoeken beginnen. 7 ziekenhuizen openen hun deuren voor u. Ik heb al eerder gezegd, u had zich daarvoor kunnen aanmelden bij uw inschrijving. Als u dat gedaan heeft, ga gerust naar daar waar u zich heeft ingeschreven. Want er wordt op u gerekend. Heeft u dat nou nog niet gedaan, dan kan u alsnog naar een ziekenhuisbezoek of naar een werkbezoek bij een ziekenhuis. Zo kan ik het beter formuleren. En die links naar die werkbezoeken die staan op het platform waar u dit nu aan het volgen bent, onder een van de andere tabblaadjes. Het wijst zich, denk ik, vanzelf. Heel veel plezier en ik zie u ongetwijfeld terug bij de talkshow om 4:30.
Leute.